Hello everyone and welcome to another session by HackJaipur. Thank you Coding Blogs for the platform. And this time we have with us Jason Etco. So he's a former intern at GitHub and an engineer at GitHub right now. He'll be giving insights about Probot and automation on GitHub, and you will be learning much about that. So next to you, Jason.
Hey everyone. I just assume that there's people out there listening and watching because I can't see anyone. So in my head, I'm just going to imagine people laughing at my jokes. But I'm excited to get to chat with you all and tell you all a little bit about Probot and automation and how different tools can be built. So I'm going to share my screen here, I think. Share screen. Okay. I think we can all see this. I'm going to assume yes until somebody tells me that it's a no. So today I'm going to be talking about building a GitHub app with Probot. There's a link there on the right. It goes to a GitHub repo. We're going to actually build something very small towards the end of the talk. So you can go ahead and open that now if you want to, or you can wait until later. I'll give you all a cue to go ahead and go there and we'll look at it on screen and everything. So first and foremost, my name is Jason. I'm an engineer at GitHub. Like they said, I used to be an intern at GitHub about 3 years ago. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that. It was a wonderful experience. I'm very pleased to still be here. No one has kicked me out yet. You can follow me on Twitter over there. I write a bunch about automation and GitHub Actions and stuff like that at that second link. So today we're going to be talking about the basics of GitHub Apps. So what they are, when you would use them, why they exist. We're going to actually create a Probot app. We're going to look at some existing ones. We're going to look at sort of the building blocks of Probot, what Probot even is. And then last but not least, we're actually going to build a really cool one. So GitHub Apps, what are they? They are a mechanism for integrating with GitHub. So GitHub has this like huge API, gigantic list of webhooks that we'll talk about more later. But they're basically a way for you to change GitHub's surface level functionality and automate core actions based on specific behaviors. So all that means is when something happens on GitHub, you can do something else. So, one of the most simple examples is when somebody opens a new issue, you can comment on that issue automatically because robots can do anything, right? So why do GitHub Apps exist? Well, this is sort of a quick history lesson on the different ways that people can integrate with GitHub. There used to be these machine user accounts that are sort of like robots that are masquerading as humans. And they have to be given access to, all of your private stuff. And they're like regular old users that are scripted, basically. Then there was a thing called GitHub Services, which was sort of code that ran inside of GitHub's infrastructure that was provided by like companies like Travis CI at the time was one of them. And they would like have this sort of special integration. And then came along OAuth apps, which is a different way of integrating where you take actions on behalf of a user, but it's done as sort of like this integration. And then last but not least are GitHub Apps. And GitHub Apps are their own sort of entity. So we'll look at this later, but if you ever go to GitHub and you see, like a little bot label, that means that it's a GitHub app that is acting on its own, right? It's not taking an action on behalf of anybody. It's its own actor with its own persona, and therefore its own rules and regulations and permissions and access controls. So let's take a quick look at what we automate now and why and how it's useful. So the first thing is CI, continuous integration, right? we write some tests, we write some code. We want to know if our code is working, and so we'll write these tests to tell us if our code is working. And most of the time, you'll sort of pair that with some sort of continuous integration system where you push your code to GitHub. GitHub will tell you, or this other CI service will tell you, your code is failing, you did something wrong, or there's like some linting error or something like that, right? That's an automation tool. Similar things like deployment. So if you've ever used Heroku or any kind of like deployment as a service product service thing, Heroku does a really great job where you can automate deployments, right? You click a button and then you say, anytime you merge to the default branch of my repository, deploy my project, which is pretty sweet. It just removes, a whole bunch of friction and a whole bunch of time, and lets you focus on things that you actually care about. So what else can we automate, right? What else is worth sort of releasing our time? So I have a couple of questions that you can ask yourself, a couple of phrases. So the first one is to identify repeated tasks, right? What is something that you do multiple times and it doesn't really change? Like sometimes there are some like different parameters to this task that you're doing. But for the most part, you're just doing the same thing multiple times. So in this example, we release a changelog every 2 weeks, right? We have this product. Every 2 weeks, we have a new release. We have to write this changelog for our customers or our users. This can definitely be automated, right? And this is actually a great example of something that is automated in a lot of different cases. I'll show you, I think later, there's a particular Probot app called Release Drafter that I really like. And it sort of stitches together a changelog based on pull requests that are part of a release. It's really great. So that kind of automation is really nice. So to break that down, we do something every period of time. If you can phrase it like that, if you can say, we do a thing on this cadence, then you're already sort of setting yourself up for success. And it also doesn't mean that every part of these processes should be automated. Just because you can generate a changelog automatically and like publish it to your users doesn't mean you don't want a human to sort of check over it and verify it at the end. So it's all just about, making your automation tools work in the best way that you need, not necessarily in the most automated way. And then another one is recognize the context. So in this example, we use GitHub and Trello to track features. Not everything has to happen in one service or program or whatever, but understanding where the different workflows sort of stitch together can be really, really important, right? So in this case, if we look at how GitHub and Trello integrate or don't integrate, you can sort of start to see inefficiencies with your workflow, right? Let's say I open an issue on GitHub and I want it to show up in Trello, but I wanted to do it in some like very customized way. You could totally make that kind of automation tool yourself. So we use service and service to track features, right? We see the different APIs from these two different services. We see how they connect. We also see how they don't connect. And as much as you can, if you can sort of reduce context switching, right? If you can try to keep all of the information from different services in one place, you'll end up being more productive, and everybody on your team and everybody that you work with will be a lot more informed. So they don't have to go like chasing around information. And then the last one here is making decisions executable. So you kind of want like an input and output, right? Going forward, all new repositories should be private. New repositories, private. So what happens when you get a new repository? You make sure that it's private, right? And if you can phrase your sort of automation tool kind of like this, then you've already done a lot of the work. Then it's just about implementation. And honestly, implementation is the easy part. We'll do some implementation. Cool. So I'm going to show you an example of some really neat automation tools This isn't in use anymore, unfortunately, but it's still very cool. So I'm going to show you a couple slides of automation tools that run on GitHub's old previous blog. And this blog was, every entry was a markdown file. Every entry had CI run against it. So you can see an example. Somebody opened a pull request, adding a new blog post, and you can see a couple of different checks that were run. So we're going to drill into a couple of them here. So one of them says, it looks like your post is scheduled to go out the same day as another post. If you haven't already, please check the calendar to see if there is a better date to ship. So I really like this example for a couple of reasons. Number one, it tells you something that a human probably wouldn't know, right? It is this robot that checked an existing schedule, checked your new post against that schedule. For a human to know to do that, they'll probably have to remember to do this thing, that if they forget, it could be really bad, or they have to know the entire schedule ahead of time, which why would anybody have to know the entire schedule by themselves? So it's this thing where, a robot really does come and augment your workflow. And then also importantly, it gives you actionable advice, right? It doesn't just say you did something wrong, good luck. It says you did something wrong, but maybe you should check the calendar to see if there's a better date to ship, right? Maybe you should go and do this thing to sort of make yourself successful. So it's not just checking, it's helping. That's a huge part. So this is another one where it warns you about screenshots in blog posts. Just like the last one, it gives you very actionable advice, right? It says, I'm going to paraphrase here, but you posted a screenshot. It's not big enough. If you're taking a shot of a small interface element, you can zoom in to take a screenshot that way, right? Generate a larger image for yourself. This is awesome. This is the kind of thing where if I'm looking at a picture, I don't know, the resolution. I don't know how large it is in terms of pixels. So this is the kind of thing that only a robot can really tell you. And it does give you actionable advice, right? It gives you a very clear way to get a larger picture out of a UI screenshot. And also all of these CI statuses, they tell me as a user that I'm not the first person to make this mistake, right? There's this, concept of rules exist because somebody did a thing that now they need a rule against, right? This is a great example of that where I must have made this mistake in the past. And so we built this automation script to make sure no one else does. Okay. So I think by now we can all see that automation is pretty cool. Lots of ways to use it, lots of ways to sort of improve our lives. How do I get started? Well, I'm going to introduce you to Probot. Probot is a framework for building GitHub apps. So we built this because building GitHub integrations and GitHub apps can be a little complicated. There are a lot of different ways to authenticate against GitHub's API. There are a lot of ways to just sort of do it wrong. So this should help. We built it a good couple of years ago, and it's in use in some of the largest GitHub integrations that exist. For example, the GitHub Slack integration. So if you're ever in Slack and you see sort of GitHub activity show up in the Slack logs, that's powered by Probot. So are a whole bunch of other things. So it is a framework built on Node.js. We'll look at some code. It uses an event emitter API. So if you're familiar with that, it should be really cool. And really the whole point is that authentication is managed for you, and you can sort of focus on everything else. So before we jump into some code, I'm going to show off a couple of really cool Probot apps. So we have a website called probot.github.io. You can check those out. Most of them are open source on GitHub, so you can, of course, go and look at some code as well. So the first one I'm going to show you is called Stale. You may have seen this one, in open source floating around. But basically, it will comment on stale pull requests or issues. By stale, it means there hasn't been any activity on it for a set amount of time, and you can configure it. And if nobody responds and says, yes, this is still relevant, it'll just close it for you. And a lot of communities have found this to be really useful. It helps them focus on, the issues and pull requests that they're able to act on, that they want to act on, rather than get distracted by, a bajillion different issues. Another one here is called Work in Progress. Since this was released, GitHub has released a couple of other features that sort of make this not necessary, but it's still a really great example because the code for this Probot app is like tiny. It's like 3 lines of code. So you can see that when Gregor in this GIF, he's updating the title of a pull request. He puts WIP, which means work in progress, at the start of his pull request. And then it causes the pull request to be pending. It means do not merge, right? So it uses CI to prevent you from making a mistake and merging a pull request that's still in progress. And then this one, this is made by probably the best developer in the world. It's me. It was a joke. I assume you're all laughing. It's called To Do. It scans your pull request and your code for these special to-do comments, and it will open a new issue when you push one of those comments to GitHub. And like any of the other examples, this is sort of like a way to augment your workflow, right? Make it easier for you to continue doing the things that you're already doing, right? You're already writing to-do comments in your code. But this should, help you keep track of them all. Cool. So normally I would ask if anybody has questions, because we're about to build something, but I can't do that. I don't know if this will start. Okay, there we go. So this is what we're going to build. You can see I comment on an issue. My super duper dev bot responds and updates the issue with some translations of what I wrote in a different language. So I'll just watch it again really quick. Ta-da! Russian and French. I speak a little bit of French, and I don't speak any Russian, so I have no idea if any of it's correct. But that's not important. Cool. So this is what a super basic Probot app looks like. We're going to dig in more, but this, from very high level, says when a new issue is created, comment on that issue. Very straightforward, right? For those of you that aren't familiar with Node.js and JavaScript, this first line just says export a function from this file. This line says register an event handler. This issues.created string, that corresponds to a webhook event that's defined by GitHub. So there's this gigantic list of different webhook events that you can listen for. This is like not even a very complete list. There's a ton more. It just lined up nicely in the slide. There's one in the bottom left called Gollum. If anybody knows what that is, normally I'd be like, come find me after and I'll give you stickers. Good luck trying that. I'm in Canada. But I'll give you a fun fact. The Gollum webhook event relates to the GitHub wiki feature. I don't know why it's called Gollum, it just is. So this next line here, we call context.github so-and-so, where context is this object that Probot gives us that has a whole bunch of context and information about this webhook that we received and now get to act on. context.github is an instance of the GitHub JavaScript OctoKit SDK. So the OctoKit SDK being a sort of wrapper around GitHub's API. And you can see a link to the documentation right there. Of course, it's all open source. And so what we're doing here is we're calling this API, but you see that we haven't done any kind of like authentication. We haven't said, I need to use this token because I'm this integration and I want to act on this repository. There's a couple of things that are going on here that are helping us make these API calls under the hood. And that's really where Probot is useful. So you can see here that I am now in the GitHub App settings. So I'll show you that on GitHub properly in a second. But I'm looking at the recent deliveries of my Probot app, right? GitHub sent me this giant JSON payload when something happened on GitHub. My Probot app then, parsed this. It said, oh, cool, this is what I'm trying to do. This is the event that I'm trying to respond to. This is the repository that it's coming from. I know what to do with this. And then it pulls out the information that it needs. So in this example, it's pulling out the issue number, the repository, that kind of stuff. And then it's responding and doing whatever it wants to do. So in our case, it was creating a new comment on an issue. So we're about to start actually looking at some code and building stuff. But if anybody feels like jumping ahead, here are some ways that you could extend that sort of GIF that I showed you. So we're going to be sort of building a simplified version of that. But here are ways that you could extend your app to do more, right? So you could add multiple language translations. You could properly translate text with code blocks and Markdown, because it's not what we're going to do today, but it would be really cool. We're also only going to focus on new issue comments. So it's not going to translate the sort of opening body of new issues and pull requests. And then you can also add some configuration options. So you can learn more about that in the Probot documentation, probot.github.io. Cool. So we're going to build together. I have not done this over like a screen sharing thingy. So if there are problems, somebody's going to have to tell me. Cool. So I assume, let's see. I assume that you can all see my, oh gosh. I think you can all see my screen here. I'm going to assume yes, somebody tell me if that's not the case. So you can see here that I have this repository that I created just for testing. We're going to go over to the link that I had at the front of the slide deck. If you need it again, I will open the slide deck really quick. I'll just give you a couple seconds to open that up, and we're going to go through that repository and build a thing. Okay, that was enough seconds. Time to build stuff. So if you go to this repository, first you'll ignore this banner at the top. And this talks a little bit about prerequisites, what you need to get started, right? You need a GitHub account. It includes some links to things that I've talked about. But most importantly, we're going to click on this Remix on Glitch button. So for those of you that aren't familiar, Glitch is a service where you can write some Node.js code in the browser. It runs your Node.js server behind the scenes and lets you interact with it all through the browser. So it just sort of skips some steps to set up your development environment. You would normally install Probot locally and like run it in your CLI and everything, but this is just a lot easier for trying it out in a workshop. So when you click on this Remix on Glitch, you'll be brought to Glitch. I did it already. It can take a couple seconds to start. But what you'll see here is an index.js file on the left here. By the way, somebody tell me if it's too small. I'll make it a little bigger still. So you want to go to this index.js file. This is Probot's entry point. It tells Probot, hey, when you start the server, run this code. Register these event handlers. You can ignore this stuff at the bottom. There's an API key here. Good luck trying to abuse it. I put a bunch of restrictions on it. But really, we're going to be using it to communicate with Google's Cloud Translation API to actually do the translations, so that we can focus on just the Probot and GitHub interactions. So you can also see here that I have this .env file, and it's empty. Good, it's supposed to be empty because we're going to generate these things. These are the environment variables and credentials and secrets that your Probot app needs to function. So behind the scenes, Glitch has already started running our Probot server. So if you go to show up here, and you go, I'm just going to choose next to the code because it's easier. What this did is it launched, or it made a GET request to our server. Our server responded with some HTML here, and there's this register GitHub app button. So keep in mind that Probot is really just a framework for building GitHub apps, right? It isn't a GitHub app necessarily. So what we need to do is register a GitHub app on GitHub's side of things, get the credentials that we need, plug it into our server, and then we'll be off to the races. One other thing that I'll do still on Glitch, so I'll go down to this tools section and I'll open the logs. So you can see here that it's showing all of the different logs for our Probot server. It shows the different requests that we've made. It shows that it's listening on this port. This is the name of my Probot app. I know it's pretty awesome. Glitch made it for me. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and register the GitHub app. So we'll open a new tab. I have to put in my password. And I will create my GitHub. Oh, sorry, I went too fast. I'll create my GitHub app. So it's just using the sort of most basic settings that we can have. So now it's asking me to install my GitHub app on a particular repository or on any repository. So GitHub apps have this sort of fine-grained permission system where it doesn't just have access to everything. I have to designate which repositories, which organizations, which resources I want it to have access to. Right? This is a security measure to make sure that if I write this like really dangerous automation tool or dangerous like code scrubbing tool, it's not just going to have access to literally everything. So I'm going to only select repositories. I'm going to choose my HackJaipur repository. So this is just an empty repo that I made. I would generally suggest that you have something like a test repository. I think I have like 6. So that you can, create issues, create pull requests, push code, just for the purposes of, testing out your automation tool. So I'll go ahead and install it. Ta-da! It did it. So now if I go back over to Glitch and I go to our .env file, you'll see that it was filled in now, right? It has this app ID, has a private key. So this is a JSON web token private key. This is what Probot uses to authenticate under the hood, but you really don't need to care about it. And then it has a webhook secret. So now you can see in our logs that when our server restarted, it actually hit this log right here. It says, yeah, your Probot app has been loaded. So we can actually change this just for fun. Hello, webcast, pretend wave emoji. And I believe that glitch should restart the server any second now. Or not. Go. Okay, it didn't work at all. That's fine. We can move on. Okay, there we go. Just took a second. Yeah, I think it's a bit backed up. That's fine. The point is now our little register GitHub app button is gone because we already did that. We can actually close this because the UI here isn't really necessary. So we have this small list of action items for us to make that Probot app actually do something. So the first thing that we want to do is we have this event listener set up here, right? It says app.on issue comment.created. So, hey app, our Probot app, listen for when a new issue comment has been created, and then run this function with this context object. So if you aren't familiar with JavaScript or Node, that's okay. You can still follow along with the concepts. We are going to be writing some JavaScript, so it's a fun language. You should try it. So first things first, we're going to get the body of the new comment, right? We make a comment. We want to see what the body is so that we can translate it. So if we go here, I'm going to actually say hello. If I press comment, and if we go into our, it will post the log of this in a second, but it will say something like, oh, actually, yeah, here. So it got a webhook right here. And if we go over to our app settings, so you can also get to this by going to your user settings and going to applications, or sorry, developer settings down here. And you have to sort of find it in here. I have a lot, so I'm just going to skip ahead to my app settings back here. So we're going to go to this advanced tab. And just like I showed in the slide deck, it shows all of the recent deliveries that GitHub has made to our Probot app. So this top one here, you can see the x-GitHub event header is issue comment, and the action was created. So it's this giant JSON payload that was sent when we typed hello. You can even find somewhere in here, this is the issue body. We want this comment. The body was hello, right? That's the comment that we just added. So how do we get this in our Probot app? Well, pretty simply. This whole JSON payload is accessible as body context.payload.comment.body. Ta-da! Where payload is this gigantic JSON object. Right, so if we wanted to get the issue title, we would do context.payload.issue.title. So we can just console log that, make sure that we did the right thing. Cool. Now, if we redeliver our payload, right, it'll be as if we had just created the comment, but we don't actually have to create a new comment. So let's redeliver this payload. Ta-da! It logged hello to our little console here. So that's great. We have the body. Now we want to translate that body, right? And then we'll get into the actually updating our comment. So we want to say const translated equals translate. So remember, I made this little helper function down here. It's very straightforward. You can see in the Google Cloud SDK docs everything about the Google Translate SDK. But we're just going to use this as sort of a little helper. So it takes our body, oops, and then it takes a language code. So this is like a 2 or maybe more letter language code. So for example, French would be FR. I believe Spanish would be ES. So if you're trying this at home, feel free to try out another language key. I don't know them all, but good luck. So now we're just going to log that as well. We want to see exactly what it responded with. And if I now go back and redeliver our payload, hey, look at that. It responded with this array. The first item in the array is the French word for hello, kind of. That's one of the French words for hello. And then this other thing that we don't care about, right? All we really care about is that first item. So we'll go ahead and change this to translated response. We'll say translated equals translated response, the 0th item in the array. So that should just be our translated comment. So just to make absolutely certain, let's try this again. We'll redeliver. And voila, which is perfect because voila is French. Cool. So now we want to prepare our new comment, right? We're going to update this comment almost as if we went over here and clicked edit, but we're going to have our bot do that for us. We want to keep this existing body, and then underneath we want to put, French or something like that, right? Our translation. So that's pretty straightforward. I'm going to say const new body equals, we'll say old body plus some new lines, a horizontal rule, which in Markdown makes this like horizontal line. It's going to be great. Just trust me. And some more new lines. And then our translated string. This is just going to make one brand new string with all of the with both the old body, right, the English version, and the French version. So because we love console logging things so much, we're going to try it. Going to give Glitch a second to try again here. I don't know if it worked. So I just went over to this tab here and refreshed the page. Don't know how well this is working. I'm going to try refreshing the page, just see if I can get it to restart the server. I've seen Glitch having some trouble today. I assume it's not going to work if I try to redeliver this payload. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. We'll just pretend that it does work, and hopefully it'll start working by the time we're ready to actually see the comment edited. So we can assume that this did print the correct string to our terminal. So now we want to actually edit the comment on GitHub, right? So far, all we've done is we've received a webhook event. We haven't actually done anything. So now we want to, enact some kind of change on GitHub. So we can do that. I'm just going to tab over to the finished code file here because I forget the exact, or not. That's fine. We're going to go to OctoKit. Yes.js. So this OctoKit is the GitHub API SDK. That will tell us exactly which methods we need to run to be able to edit a comment. So we'll type in here, update a comment. Here, update an issue comment. So it looks like we need octokit.issues.update comment. It takes these parameters. So that's pretty easy. Perfect. Okay. It did run eventually. And it even printed our string here. Why is it all weird? Okay, perfect. So we'll go ahead and say await context.github. So remember from the slides before, context.github is an instance of that OctoKit SDK that comes pre-authenticated to actually, do the things that we want it to do. We'll say issues dot update comment, and then we want to give it some of those parameters. So we'll start with the comment ID. So remember, tabbing back over here takes us comment ID, and similar to the body, we can get that right off of the payload. So we'll say context.payload.comment.id. And if you don't know that off the top of your head, because why would you? You can go over to the recent deliveries here and scroll down, find this comment. You can see that it's available as ID right here. Then we want our body, which is this new body string. Oops. And then the last couple of things that we'll need are these owner and repo properties. So this is the owner and name of the repository that we want to update this comment in. So in our case, it would be Jason Etcovich, HackJaipur. And we could get those off of the payload directly, right? They're available if you scroll down in here somewhere. Got this repository object, has this owner object with this login, and also this name, or we could parse out full name if we wanted to. But Probot has a little helper for doing that. So you can call context.repo and wrap it in this. So I'll pause there for a second because that's kind of a confusing syntax sometimes. Really all it does is it returns an object with these owner and repo keys. So if I call context.repo, it does that. And if you pass an object here, you can sort of merge them in. So here we can do this as well. Yeah. Owner and repo. Cool. So this should be everything that's needed for our API call to be successful, right? Hopefully, when we redeliver that payload, it will log all of these different things, and then it will update the comment with this new body. Let's see if it does it. So one last time, I'm going to go back over here. I'll call redeliver. We'll redeliver this payload. Before we go to the issue, we'll see if anything yelled at us. Doesn't look like it. Everything seems to have gone great. If I go here, might have to refresh the page. Ta-da! You can see that our issue comment was edited by the name of my bot. It even has this little bot label. We have kept our original comment, but most importantly, we have this translation here. So that's pretty much it. We in the last couple of minutes, we built a Probot app that translates content in GitHub issue comments. That's like a legitimate use case that a bunch of communities on GitHub could build and make use of. And this is one very, very simple implementation of that. If you go back over to the repository, the workshop repository here, just like in the slides, there's a little section on improving this app. Lots of ways you could do that. But yeah, so normally I would open it up to questions. I don't know if we can do that. Can somebody tell me if we can do that? I'm going to try doing that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'm happy to go back if anybody has questions that I can answer. Cool. Well, I do see the comments. So if anybody has a question, I can stick around for the next 15 minutes. And if anybody has a question, you're welcome to drop it in that comments section. I'll do my best to answer. So you're welcome to ask questions about automation or Probot or Node or GitHub or whatever you want. Thank you. Probot or OAuth, what do you recommend? It's a very good question, actually. Typically, you'll want to use, so just to rephrase the question, it's more about GitHub Apps versus OAuth integrations. You'll want to use GitHub Apps most of the time. There are features of GitHub's API that are only available to GitHub Apps. So for example, something called the checks API, which is sort of like commit statuses, but with a whole bunch of extra context. That's one specific example. There are a lot of others. So you'll want to use GitHub Apps most of the time. There are some cases where it'll be a little trickier. OAuth apps get access to a lot more things than people generally want. Like, it's not as fine-grained. You can't say like only have access to open issues on these specific repositories. So that comes with a lot of trade-offs. But at the same time, it's easier to just like log into an OAuth app and start using it. So I hope that answers your question. I'd say most of the time GitHub Apps. How can we upload file size more than 25 megabytes in GitHub? So there's this thing called Git LFS, LFS being large file system. I would look into that. I haven't tried doing anything like that. Git's not really built for large files, but Git LFS is specifically built for large files. So check that out. Can Probot be integrated with other party apps? I assume you mean third-party apps. Yes, absolutely. Probot is under the hood just a node server. So you can make external API calls to anything you want. I wrote a blog post on JasonET.co. If I could figure out how to put a comment in the thing, I would comment that. But you can, there's a blog post there about basically building your own Probot, and it goes into how Probot is just an express server and sort of the authentication building blocks. And you can extend that to integrate with whatever else you want. It doesn't even have to be only GitHub. It doesn't have to be GitHub. It's just one way of building this sort of like event-driven API. Not related to Probot, I wanted to ask, what project did you make in your college life that you are proud of, and how was your journey getting into GitHub? There was a project that I worked on when I was really trying to improve my skills in really just building stuff. So like, it wasn't specific to a given language. It was, how do I take this idea and make it a thing? So I built a Node CMS, a content management system. It is a little janky. It technically kind of works, but it was a phenomenal project for me to get the hang of, the different ways that people authenticate, and like it had to send emails and it had this UI, and it was like this whole large project that touched a lot of different areas. So it was very, very useful. And in terms of my journey getting into GitHub, it wasn't anything special. I needed an internship. I was on GitHub. I saw, hey, there's a careers page. I applied. That's pretty much it. And I think that's actually true for most interns at GitHub. Our hiring process is very conversational. So, it's pretty casual. There's not a lot of like whiteboarding tests or anything like that. Sometimes we'll do a technical exercise, but it's we'll give you sort of a brief and you go off and you do it on your own throughout like a week or something. It's not supposed to take you a week, but spend 2 hours on it during a week, come back to us and we'll talk through it with you, that kind of stuff. Can you share your LinkedIn ID? I could if I knew it. I'm Jason Etcovich on LinkedIn. You're welcome to add me. Can we implement Probot with GitLab? That's a good question. Hypothetically, sure. The way that Probot itself is built, it's only meant, or the sort of underlying authentication mechanisms are based off of the payload that GitHub sends us. So there's a little installation ID that's part of every webhook payload that Probot uses to figure out like where it should get a token from, an API token, and all of those credentials that are generated that were in that .env file. Those are all specific to GitHub, but a similar kind of framework could totally be built for GitLab. Like I said, I wrote that blog post. You should check it out if you're interested in doing that. What kind of work is assigned to you? I work on GitHub's community and engineering team, or community and ecosystem engineering team. So a lot of my focus is on building community-focused features and things. Right now I'm working on some new potential directions for GitHub's documentation and help docs content. So I can't really tell you more about that, but it'll be pretty cool. Your views on replacing master. I mean, yeah, you should do it. If I'm assuming you're asking if a certificate will be provided. I see a banner on my screen that says, "Thanks for attending the workshop. Fill the form at so-and-so for a certificate." So I assume the answer is yes, but I have no idea. Ooh, I missed one. Which is more important, projects or internships? Both? I don't know. Internships are really useful, but if you are at an internship that's not helping you learn and you're just kind of like doing stuff that you already know how to do, or you're doing stuff that, doesn't improve your, doesn't help you grow in any way, then it's not useful. Certainly if it doesn't pay you, then it's definitely not useful in that sense. So I think that nobody can be a really great developer if they only do the work that is given to them. Sometimes you just got to like go out and build something cool for yourself and learn from it. Hope that answers your question. That seems to be all of the questions.
Hey everyone, if you have any questions, do feel free to ask in the comment section. So Jason, there is one question, and what are your views on replacing master?
Oh, I answered that one briefly, but I mean, you might as well do it. It's really, really easy. It's not hard at all. Like I work very much in the ecosystem of GitHub's API for creating repositories, where it would be the most complicated, and it's really easy. And if it makes anybody feel more included in your communities, then if you can't do the easy stuff, you definitely can't do the hard stuff. So you might as well just do it. I see 2 more questions here. Any advice for college students? I have advice, but it's not very good advice, which is you're learning in school, you're spending a lot of time in computer science classes or like learning about, languages or whatever. But your education can't stop there. It's just not enough. It sucks to say, but you have to experiment and build stuff and learn on your own and learn how to learn on your own. So, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of energy, but my advice would be when you leave class, that's not the end of your education. You need to try more stuff that you're not learning in class. What is the use of Probot? If you want to automate certain things in your repositories, there's maybe an underlying question there, which is what's the difference between Probot and GitHub Actions? I know that Prem spoke earlier about GitHub Actions. That's a bit of a longer conversation, but most of the time you'll want to use GitHub Actions because it lets GitHub run your code for you, which is really nice. I have another blog post about Probot versus GitHub Actions and when you would use either one. So there are some use cases around like persistence. Let's say you want to talk to a database, or you want to like show a UI to your users. Because Probot is just an Express app, you can do a whole lot more. But then that also comes with trade-offs as well. What would you say to students joining IT companies amidst this pandemic? Good luck. It really sucks. Like, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, it really sucks. I don't know. I don't think anything. I don't think there's anything to say except I hope it works out for you all. I really do, because graduating and being a student right now is probably the worst. So, good luck. Any other questions that I can answer while I drink my coffee?
I guess, Jason, we can wrap up the section. Oh, there's one more question. Yeah.
In the long run, will it be beneficial to learn Node.js or Python Django stack? I don't know. All I'll say is that Node.js is great. I very much enjoy using it. Lots of companies are being built around Node stacks. The ecosystem is gigantic. So I don't think Python Django stack will ever truly go away by any means. But Node.js is pretty fun, and you should try it. It's fun. Not for any other reason. No, not black coffee. I like a little milk in my coffee. Competitive programming or projects or internships. I never really got into competitive programming. So I don't know. I like working on small projects and getting a little bit out of like a couple of hours of trying stuff and learning, and then totally throwing it away, because sometimes you build stuff just to learn. Should I learn PHP? Only if you want to. I don't see a lot of companies using it from scratch nowadays. Like, a lot of the companies that use it have been using it for a long time, which is a perfectly good reason to want to learn it and use it in your everyday. But if the choice is between like PHP or something like Node or Rust or Go, I would choose one of those instead. How can one get placed at GitHub? Any shortcuts? Not really. Just apply. Apply for internships if that's what you're interested in, and good luck. Competitive programming is not important for clearing interviews. I mean, it depends where you apply to. Like, GitHub's interview process is not like that at all. We have more conversations. We do like pair programming as part of the interview process. But if you're applying to things like Google or Facebook or whatever, then I understand that that's a much bigger thing there. Is working on projects and learning new things is good, or rather I should focus on, I don't know what DS is, algorithms, competitive programming. I mean, it's up to you. There's lots of different ways that you can grow as an engineer. all of what you just described are good options. I personally like building stuff. I like having this idea that I can try to make and see if it works. That's how I learn best. But if you learn best in these other ways, go for it. How should I start automation and robotics? I don't know anything about robotics, so I can't help you there. For assuming you're talking about workflow automation, check out Probot. How to get into GitHub or how to apply for internships in GitHub, github.com/about/careers. Data structures. Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Cool. I think we're at time. I'd be happy to answer more questions, but I think y'all have somewhere else to go.
Awesome, Jason. So we can wrap up the session, and thank you so much for taking out your time and giving this session on Probot.
Sure thing. Anytime. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jason, so much.
I'm going to stop the camera now. Bye.
Bye.